Winter 1944. Camp Concordia, Kansas. The glass bottle sweated in the bitter cold. Hauptmann Werner Scholz held it like a fragile relic from another world. He'd commanded a panzer company across 2,000 miles of North African desert. He'd watched comrades burn in metal coffins under Rommel's desperate final campaigns. He'd eaten sand-crusted bread and drank water that tasted like rust and defeat. But this 5-cent bottle of cherry-flavored soda called Dr. Pepper, this was the thing that finally broke him. Across America's heartland that winter, 378,898 German prisoners of war would discover what their Führer never told them. They would learn that the nation they'd been taught to despise as weak and degenerate possessed a power more devastating than any Wehrmacht division. The United States didn't just defeat enemies on battlefields. It transformed them in prison camps through an arsenal of abundance: candy bars, ice cream sundaes, Coca-Cola by the case, chocolate so plentiful that guards gave it away to children. These simple luxuries, rationed to memory in the Third Reich, would systematically dismantle Nazi ideology more thoroughly than any Allied bomb. The war would be won with sugar and carbonation, with frozen cream and cocoa, proving that democracies don't conquer through cruelty, they convert through kindness. What began as bewilderment at American excess would become the complete ideological collapse of men who'd marched for Hitler. They would return to a shattered fatherland carrying revolutionary knowledge: prosperity flows from freedom, not force. This is the story of how America weaponized abundance. The desert's betrayal. Tunisia. April 1943. The end came not with glory but with dust and empty ammunition crates. Hauptmann Scholz's command had been reduced from 43 men to 11. They'd retreated across Libya, then Tunisia, always retreating, while Stuka dive bombers screamed overhead accomplishing nothing. The Americans and British closed like a vice. Rommel, the desert fox himself, had abandoned them, recalled to Germany, leaving his Africa corps to die or surrender in North Africa's final pocket. On April 28, British infantry appeared on the ridgeline. No ammunition remained. No fuel. No orders. Just empty canteens and the knowledge that 2 years of suffering had purchased exactly nothing. Scholz raised his hands with his men. Within 3 hours, something impossible happened. British soldiers handed them water, clean water, and then tins of meat. Real beef, not the sawdust-textured mystery protein the Wehrmacht called Feldration. An American liaison officer distributed small rectangular packages stamped with English words. K-rations, he said. Emergency field meals. Scholz tore his open. Inside, crackers that didn't crumble to powder, cheese that smelled like actual dairy, a chocolate bar labeled Hershey's, instant coffee, sugar cubes, cigarettes, and chewing gum. His emergency ration contained more variety than a week's worth of German supply. His radio operator, Gefreiter Klaus Hoffmann, stared at the chocolate bar like it was a hallucination. Herr Hauptmann, when did we last see chocolate? 1941, Christmas Leave. Scholz bit into the Hershey bar. Sweetness exploded across his tongue, pure, uncomplicated pleasure he'd forgotten existed. For 2 years they'd told themselves deprivation built character. That hardship forged superior warriors. This American emergency ration, this throwaway meal that enemy soldiers complained about, made that narrative taste like the lie it was. The Atlantic revelation: the Liberty ship SS George Washington cut through moderate Atlantic swells in late May 1943. Scholz stood on deck with 300 other German prisoners, watching North Africa fade into heat shimmer behind them. They'd been warned. Propaganda officers had spent years preparing Wehrmacht soldiers for this moment. American prison camps would be brutal. Starvation rations. Forced labor. Racial abuse. The decadent Americans, weakened by Mongol mixing and Jewish manipulation, would show their true savage nature once Germans fell into their grasp. Instead, on the second day at sea, American sailors served them breakfast in the ship's hold: pancakes, fried eggs, bacon, toast with butter, coffee with milk and sugar. Real sugar. Not saccharin. Not ersatz sweetener made from coal tar. Actual crystalline sucrose in paper packets on every table. Hoffman whispered, "They're fattening us for something. This can't be standard." But it was. Lunch brought soup, sandwiches, fruit. Dinner delivered pot roast with potatoes and vegetables, followed by cake. On their fourth day crossing the Atlantic, in the middle of the ocean, during a global war, American sailors served ice cream. Schulz watched a teenage crewman operate a hand-crank freezer, churning cream and sugar into frozen dessert. The boy worked casually, chatting with his mates, treating this miracle like routine drudgery. He scooped vanilla ice cream into bowls and distributed it to German prisoners of war. The cold sweetness dissolved on Schulz's tongue. He tried to remember the last time he'd tasted ice cream. Berlin, 1939, before the invasion of Poland. 5 years ago. Another lifetime. Another world. A German Unteroffizier began weeping silently, ice cream melting in his untouched bowl. "My children," he whispered. "My children haven't seen milk in 3 years. And I'm eating ice cream. On a ship. In the middle of the war." The cognitive dissonance was total. Every meal demolished another pillar of Nazi doctrine. If Americans could serve ice cream to enemies mid-ocean while fighting on 4 continents, what did that say about comparative industrial capacity? What did it reveal about which civilization was actually superior? Schulz stared at the empty bowl in his hands and felt the first crack in his ideological foundation. Arrival in abundance, they disembarked at Norfolk, Virginia in early June. The port sprawled across thousands of acres, more vessels, cranes, warehouses, and infrastructure than Hamburg and Bremen combined. Liberty ships lined the docks like patient steel whales. According to the American officer processing them, these ships were mass-produced at a rate of 1 completed every 42 hours. 42 hours. Germany couldn't build a rowboat that fast. The processing facility fed them again, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, pie, milk. Then American military police loaded them onto passenger trains, not cattle cars, but actual coaches with cushioned seats, for the journey inland. The dining car served full meals. Schulz sat in upholstered comfort watching American countryside scroll past while eating beef stew and cornbread. Hoffman kept touching the window glass as if verifying reality. "This is prisoner transport." Through state after state they traveled, and through the windows they witnessed an America that propaganda had declared impossible. Every small town possessed paved roads, electric lights, automobiles. Every train station featured vending machines selling Coca-Cola and snacks. Every city showed 0 bomb damage, 0 deprivation, 0 evidence of sacrifice. This nation was fighting the largest war in human history, and it looked like peacetime. Camp Concordia, the prison camp outside Concordia, Kansas, could have housed a Wehrmacht brigade in luxury. Electric lighting. Indoor plumbing with hot water. Heated barracks for winter. A canteen, what Americans called the PX store, stocked with goods that would have graced elite Berlin shops before the war. The camp commander, a lieutenant colonel named Roberts, addressed them through an interpreter. "You will be treated according to Geneva Convention standards. You will receive 3 meals daily, medical care, and wages for labor, 80 cents per day. The camp exchange sells sundries, food, beverages, and tobacco at civilian prices. 80 cents daily." Schulz did the mathematics. At 5 cents per item, that meant 16 purchases from the canteen every day. The math seemed fantastical until he visited the PX. The shelves overwhelmed: Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Royal Crown, Dr. Pepper, and regional brands he'd never heard of. Candy bars from Hershey, Mars, Nestle, dozens of varieties. Chewing gum. Cookies. Crackers. Canned fruit. Fresh fruit when available. Ice cream bars in an electric freezer. Cigarettes from multiple manufacturers. Toiletries. Writing materials. Magazines and books. Everything cost 5 to 15 cents. The abundance wasn't special provision for prisoners. This was ordinary American retail, transplanted into a Kansas prison camp. Every small town in America had stores like this. Every citizen expected this selection as normal. Scholes bought a Coca-Cola, his first, and carried it outside. He popped the cap and tasted the fizzing sweetness. The flavor was complex: vanilla, citrus, spices he couldn't identify, all suspended in carbonated water. It was completely unnecessary. Frivolous. Decadent. It was available to anyone with a nickel. He thought about his wife in Dresden. Her last letter, received before his capture, described the ration: 280 grams of sugar monthly when available, perhaps 10 ounces of meat weekly if lucky, milk only for children under 6. She'd written that their daughter had forgotten what oranges tasted like. Scholes sat on the barracks steps, drinking his 5-cent Coca-Cola, and felt something inside him shift. Not collapse yet, just shift. A foundation settling before it cracked. The mathematics of defeat. Winter arrived in Kansas with prairie winds that cut like shrapnel. But the barracks stayed warm, central heating, another American assumption. And that winter, the camp administration made a mistake. They allowed prisoners access to American newspapers and magazines. Scholes had always been good with numbers. Artillery calculations required precision. Now he applied those skills to the statistics printed casually in American publications, data the United States published openly for anyone to read. 1943 American production figures: sugar production, approximately 7.4 million tons annually. With a population of 135 million, that meant 109 pounds per capita per year. Ration to civilians at 2 pounds monthly, still 24 pounds annually, 10 times German allocation. Chocolate and cocoa, 650 million pounds produced, 380 million for military alone. Germany's entire chocolate industry had been militarized in 1940, and still couldn't match these numbers. Coca-Cola, 5.2 billion bottles in 1943. That was 38 bottles per American citizen annually. During a war. Of a purely recreational beverage. Ice cream, 548 million gallons. 4 gallons per capita. Frozen dessert treated as ordinary, not luxury. Milk, 119 billion pounds. Nearly 900 pounds per person. Even heavily rationed, Americans consumed more dairy than Germans during peacetime. Scholes created a comparison chart in his notebook: American prisoner of war rations versus German civilian rations, daily calories, 3,400, POW, versus 1,350, German civilian, sugar monthly, unlimited, POW, versus 280 grams, German, when available, meat weekly, 32 ounces, POW, versus 10 ounces, German, often unavailable, milk, 1 quart daily available, POW, versus none except children under 6, German, coffee, unlimited, POW, versus ersatz only, German. The numbers told an irrefutable story: German prisoners in American captivity ate better than German civilians in freedom. The thousand-year Reich couldn't feed its own people as well as the decadent democracy fed its enemies. Hoffman studied the charts over Schultz's shoulder. If these numbers are real, they're published in newspapers. These aren't secrets. They're public facts. Then we never had a chance, did we? Not really. Not against this. Scholes closed the notebook. No. We never did. The sugar incident February 1944 brought humid weather unusual for Kansas winter. In the camp kitchen where Schultz's detail worked, moisture infiltrated a storage room and hardened 500 pounds of refined sugar into concrete-like blocks. The American mess sergeant examined the damaged sugar, shrugged, and ordered it thrown out. Can't use it like this. Too much trouble. Order replacements. Order replacements. 500 pounds of sugar discarded because moisture made it inconvenient. Scholes and 2 other German prisoners stood in the storage room, staring at the sugar blocks. In Germany, this quantity represented the monthly ration for 1,785 people. Their families, their children, scraped together grams of sugar while American kitchens threw away hundreds of pounds because it required effort to recover. Gefreiter Hoffmann actually reached out to touch the discarded sugar as if it were a dying relative. We could steam it. Break it down. Save it. Why? Schulz asked bitterly. They have unlimited more. That's the point. That's what we were never supposed to understand. The waste wasn't carelessness. It was systematic abundance so vast that conservation became unnecessary. The economic surplus that permitted such waste, that was power. Real power. Not military parades or propaganda speeches, but production capacity so overwhelming that scarcity became alien. They threw away the sugar. Schulz felt something inside him crumble with it. Christmas with the enemy, December 1944. The war dragged toward its inevitable conclusion. In the Ardennes forest, German forces launched a desperate winter offensive that would fail within weeks. In Kansas, American civilians prepared for Christmas. And then something extraordinary happened. Church groups from Concordia and surrounding towns arrived at the camp with packages. For the prisoners. For German prisoners of war. The Lutheran Church brought cookies, homemade, wrapped in wax paper. The Methodist Women's Auxiliary brought candy and toiletries. The Catholic parish delivered books in German, writing materials, decks of cards. Individual families sent packages containing soap, socks, cigarettes, chocolate bars, small luxuries. Lieutenant Colonel Roberts explained through the interpreter, many Americans have family members fighting overseas. But we believe in showing kindness even to enemies. This is Christmas. Schulz held a package from someone named Margaret Henderson. Inside, 6 homemade sugar cookies, 2 Hershey bars, a pencil set, and a handwritten note in careful German, "May you find peace and return safely to your family. God bless you." This woman, who probably had sons or nephews fighting against Germany, had spent her rationed sugar to bake cookies for a German officer. Had spent her own money to buy him chocolate. Had wished him safe return to the country currently trying to kill her countrymen. Hoffmann read his own note, tears streaming. Herr Hauptmann, why? Why are they kind to us? We would have killed them on the battlefield. We did kill their soldiers. Schulz had no answer. This mercy, this strength expressed through generosity rather than cruelty, Nazi ideology had no framework for comprehending it. They'd been taught that kindness was weakness, that compassion was racial contamination, that might made right. But these civilians possessed the might. America was winning the war decisively. And they chose mercy. Strength through mercy. Power exercised with restraint. Victory paired with humanity. Everything he believed inverted. Schulz ate a sugar cookie baked by an enemy's mother and tasted the complete dissolution of his worldview. Labor and learning. Spring 1945 brought farm work. Labor shortages pulled German POWs into American agriculture, and Schulz's detail traveled daily to work in wheat fields and cattle ranches surrounding Concordia. They witnessed American farming that made German agricultural methods look medieval. Mechanization everywhere, combine harvesters, tractors, mechanical planters, irrigation systems. Single farms produced output that would require 3 German villages to match. At a dairy operation, Schulz watched modern milking machines process 100 cows in the time it would take German farmers to hand milk 20. The dairy foreman, a man named Jenkins who'd lost a son at Anzio, showed them the operation without hostility. We ship this to processing plants, Jenkins explained through a translator. Goes to butter, cheese, ice cream, condensed milk. Some for military, most for civilian market. How much does this farm produce? Schulz asked. About 4,000 gallons daily. 4,000 gallons. One farm. Daily. During lunch break, Jenkins shared his meal with the prisoners, sandwiches, fruit, cookies, Coca-Cola. Standard American worker lunch. He talked about his dead son while sharing food with German soldiers. Jimmy wanted to be a teacher, Jenkins said, looking at a creased photograph. Didn't matter now. But I figure you boys got families too. Got people waiting for you like Jimmy ain't coming back to us. This was the America Nazi propaganda never described, farmers who fed enemies, fathers who grieved but didn't hate, a society wealthy enough to mechanize everything yet still valued human dignity. On the truck ride back to camp, Hoffman voiced what they all felt: we fought for the wrong side, didn't we? Scholes watched Kansas farmland roll past, golden with wheat that would feed millions. We fought for a lie that promised greatness through conquest. They built greatness through creation. Yes. We chose wrong. The reversal summer 1945 brought news of Germany's surrender, then Japan's. The war ended. Schultz's imprisonment continued, but now with a purpose he couldn't have imagined years earlier. Using his 80-cent daily wages, supplemented by savings, Scholes began purchasing goods from the PX. Not for himself. For home. The American and International Red Cross permitted prisoners to send parcels to Germany. Scholes packed his carefully: instant coffee, chocolate bars, canned meat, powdered milk, sugar cubes, soap, cigarettes that could be traded for anything. The reversal was complete. He, a prisoner, could provide better for his family than the regime he'd fought for. The nation that imprisoned him allowed him to feed his starving children while the Thousand-Year Reich collapsed into rubble and famine. Across American camps, German POWs sent approximately 11.4 million parcels home during their captivity. Prisoners feeding civilians. Enemies demonstrating more care for German families than the Nazi state ever had. Schultz's wife wrote back, her letter filled with disbelief: Werner, the children cried when we opened your package. They remembered chocolate. Little Greta asked if you were truly in a prison, because how could prisoners send such wealth? I told her you were being cared for by good people. Is that true? Were we lied to about everything? Yes, Scholes wrote back. We were lied to about everything. But I am learning truth now, and it tastes like Coca-Cola and comes in packages marked, Made in USA. The Americans defeated us not through brutality but through proof that freedom produces abundance, that democracy outperforms dictatorship, that kindness is strength we never understood. Save the chocolate for the children. Tell them their father learned important lessons from former enemies. Tell them the future doesn't have to be built on conquest. Spring 1946, the repatriation ships departed from New York Harbor throughout early 1946. Scholes stood on deck with hundreds of other prisoners, watching the Statue of Liberty recede into harbor mist. He'd gained 18 pounds during captivity. Medical examinations confirmed he was healthier than when captured. His teeth had been fixed. American military dentists treated POWs with the same care as American soldiers. He'd received new clothes for the journey home. His pockets contained 3 Hershey bars purchased for his children. The man returning to Germany bore little resemblance to the one who'd surrendered in Tunisia. Hauptmann Werner Scholes had been a true believer, Nazi Party member, Wehrmacht officer, convinced of racial superiority and destiny. That man died somewhere between the first Coca-Cola and the last Christmas cookie. The man on this ship understood that civilizations were measured not by conquest but by what they created. That true power meant producing such abundance you could waste sugar, give ice cream to enemies, allow civilians to send cookies to prisoners. That democracy, messy and inefficient as it appeared, generated prosperity that totalitarian efficiency never could. Below decks, Hoffman organized a final gathering of their company, the 11 who'd survived Tunisia together and spent 3 years in American captivity together. What do we tell them? Someone asked. What do we say when they ask about the camps? Scholes considered carefully. We tell the truth. That we were treated with dignity by people who had every reason to hate us. That we ate better as prisoners than our families did as citizens. That the democracy we were taught to despise demonstrated strength our ideology couldn't comprehend. He paused. And we tell them that Germany must rebuild differently. Not through dominance, but through creation. Not through fear, but through freedom. We learn this at enemy expense. We owe it to the dead to apply it. The ship carried them toward a destroyed homeland. Cities in rubble. Infrastructure shattered. 12 million dead. The 1,000-year Reich reduced to year 12 ashes. But these men carried something else, knowledge. Understanding. A blueprint for reconstruction based on American lessons. They'd witnessed what free markets, democratic governance, and human dignity could produce. They would become unexpected ambassadors for the very system they'd fought to destroy. Homecoming Bremen Harbor. April 1946. The destroyed city shocked even men prepared for devastation. Rubble stretched to the horizon. Skeletal buildings clawed at gray skies. Hollow-eyed survivors picked through debris. Schulz's train to Dresden took 4 days instead of 4 hours, tracks destroyed, bridges collapsed, every journey now an obstacle course through Germany's corpse. He shared his Hershey bars with starving children at stations. Their gratitude felt like knives in his chest. Dresden existed only as a memory and a wound. The February 1945 firebombing had erased the Baroque city he'd known. His family survived only because his wife had evacuated to her sister's farm outside the city. When he finally reached them, his daughter Greta didn't recognize him. She was 9 now, hollow-cheeked, wearing clothes made from repurposed Wehrmacht coats. His wife Helene had aged a decade in 3 years. But they'd survived. Against all odds, through strategic bombing and Soviet occupation and starvation, his family survived. That evening, as rationed potato soup simmered on a makeshift stove, Schulz distributed treasures from his pack, coffee, Real coffee, from the PX, saved and hoarded. Sugar cubes wrapped in paper. A chocolate bar he'd kept through the entire journey. Greta held the Hershey bar like sacred scripture. "Papa, is this real chocolate?" "Yes, Liebchen. Real chocolate. From America." "Did they hurt you there? In the prison?" Schulz exchanged glances with Helene. "How did you explain to a child that imprisonment in enemy lands proved more humane than freedom under their own government?" "No, Greta. They didn't hurt me. They fed me. They gave me medicine when I was sick. They allowed me to work and earn money to send you packages. They treated me better than," he stopped. "Than our own Reich treated our people." He couldn't say it. Not yet. But Helene understood. Her eyes held the knowledge of someone who'd survived the home front, who'd watched neighbors starve while party officials hoarded, who'd witnessed the lie collapse firsthand. "The Americans," she said carefully, "they sound like good people. They are. And Helene, we were wrong. About everything. The ideology, the war, the assumptions. All of it. I need to tell you what I learned, because Germany must learn it too if we're to survive." Through that night and many after, Schulz shared his testimony. The abundance. The statistics. The kindness. The systematic proof that democracy and freedom produced what totalitarian control never could. The advocates by 1947, former POWs like Schulz formed an unlikely coalition. They advocated for accepting American aid through what would become the Marshall Plan. They testified to their countrymen about American capacity and generosity. They pushed for Western-style democracy against Soviet communism creeping from the East. They faced skepticism. "You were brainwashed," old party members claimed. "Seduced by luxury. You betrayed the fatherland." But numbers don't lie. Schulz presented the production statistics he'd carefully documented. American industrial capacity wasn't propaganda, it was mathematics. The United States produced more during the war while maintaining civilian abundance than Germany produced during total mobilization. We can rebuild through conquest, Scholes told town hall meetings, factory workers, displaced persons. Or we can rebuild through creation. I've seen both systems. Only one produces ice cream for prisoners. Only one allows such abundance that sugar can be thrown away. Only one treats enemies with dignity. That's the model we need. The Marshall Plan arrived in 1948, bringing American dollars and goods into Western Germany. Former POWs served as crucial bridges, explaining American intentions, facilitating cooperation, advocating for democratic reconstruction. Scholes found work with an American import company, helping bring Coca-Cola back to Germany. The circular poetry wasn't lost on him. The drink that shattered his ideology now became his livelihood. When the first Coca-Cola bottling plant opened in Essen in 1949, Scholes attended the ceremony. He watched German workers operate American machinery, producing the fizzing beverage that symbolized everything the Third Reich opposed and everything the Federal Republic needed to embrace. He bought a bottle, his first on German soil, and found it tasted identical to that first one in Kansas. The standardization, the quality control, the systematic excellence that made every bottle the same whether drunk in New York or Essen, that was the lesson. Democracy could organize and produce without totalitarian force. His daughter Greta, now 13, tried Coca-Cola for the first time that day. "Papa, is this what America tastes like?" Scholes smiled. "No, Liebchen. America tastes like possibility. This is just the advertisement." The miracle through the 1950s, West Germany's economic miracle astonished the world. The shattered nation rebuilt with stunning speed, transforming from rubble to prosperity within a decade. Former POWs played quiet but crucial roles. They understood American business methods, appreciated free market efficiency, embraced consumer culture, advocated for democratic capitalism. The lessons learned in Kansas camps and Mississippi farms and Texas ranches became blueprints for German reconstruction. Scholes watched his country transform. Supermarkets appeared, vast stores stocked with variety that would have seemed impossible in 1946. American products filled shelves, Coca-Cola, Wrigley's gum, Kraft cheese, and eventually McDonald's restaurants where German children ate hamburgers their grandparents would have considered exotic. Ice cream parlors opened in every city, serving sundaes piled with excess that once symbolized enemy decadence but now represented recovered prosperity. Sugar became so abundant that waste ceased to wound. In 1955, Scholes took his family to Berlin, now divided between East and West. The contrast couldn't have been starker. West Berlin thrived with lights, shops, traffic, and abundance. East Berlin, under Soviet communism, remained gray, rationed, depressed, a living museum of totalitarian scarcity. "Papa," Greta asked, "why is it different?" "Because of what I tried to tell you years ago. Systems matter. Freedom produces abundance. Control produces deprivation. That's not propaganda, it's observable fact." They ate ice cream at a West Berlin cafe overlooking the Brandenburg Gate. Vanilla with chocolate sauce, whipped cream, cherry on top, the full American-style sundae. Scholes savored each bite, remembering the first frozen dessert on a Liberty ship crossing the Atlantic. Full circle. From prisoner amazed by ice cream to free man eating it with his daughter in a rebuilt Germany. The journey contained everything: defeat and redemption, lies and truth, ideology and reality. The testimony 30 years after war's end. A young historian from the University of Hamburg interviewed Scholes for an oral history project about German POWs in America. "Herr Scholes, what was the most significant moment of your captivity?" He considered. "So many moments: the first Coca-Cola, the discarded sugar, the Christmas cookies, the reversal of sending parcels home. The day I realized we'd lost more than a war," he finally answered. "We'd lost our entire understanding of reality. Nazi ideology taught us that might makes right, that conquest builds empires, that hardship purifies. America proved that abundance comes from freedom, that strength includes mercy, that prosperity flows from human dignity and democratic systems. A single moment of realization. Yes. December 1944. An American woman I'd never met sent me Christmas cookies she'd baked with her rationed sugar. She wished me safe return to my family, while her country fought mine. That kindness, that strength exercised through generosity rather than force, that's when I knew. We hadn't just lost a war. We'd fought for the wrong civilization entirely. The historian scribbled notes. And the American abundance? The food, the consumer goods. Scholes smiled. Young man, they served us ice cream on ships in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean during a global war. They threw away 500 pounds of sugar because it hardened. They let us send food parcels to Germany from prison camps. The abundance wasn't propaganda, it was systematic proof that their system worked better. Much better. Those of us honest enough to see it couldn't unsee it. Did you feel brainwashed? Brainwashing implies lies. They fed us truth, literal and figurative. We'd been fed lies by our own government. America just let us taste reality. Reality was sweet. Reality fizzed. Reality came in 5-cent bottles available to anyone, even enemies. That's not brainwashing. That's education through evidence. The interview lasted 4 hours. Schultz's testimony joined thousands of others, former POWs whose experiences in American captivity shaped their post-war advocacy for democracy, free markets, and Western alliance. These men became unexpected architects of modern Germany. They'd tasted the future in prison camps, and they brought that flavor home. Legacy Berlin Wall falls. East meets West after 44 years of division. Scholes, now 76, watched television coverage with his grandchildren, Greta's children, who'd grown up in prosperous West Germany with Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and abundance so normal they didn't recognize it as miraculous. His grandson, also named Werner, asked, "Opa, why did the East fail?" How to explain complex economic systems to a 12-year-old. Scholes reached for the lesson he'd learned decades ago. Bring me a Coca-Cola from the refrigerator. Young Werner returned with a bottle. Scholes opened it, heard the familiar fizz, smelled the distinctive aroma that hadn't changed in 46 years. This bottle was made in Essen. It tastes identical to Coca-Cola made in America, or Japan, or Brazil. The system that produces this, quality control, standardization, distribution, marketing, requires freedom, cooperation, and trust. You need free workers who want to do good work. You need companies competing to excel. You need consumers with money to buy products. You need a society that rewards innovation and efficiency. He took a sip. Communist systems can't do this. They can produce quantity through force, but not quality through excellence. They can mandate work, but not inspire pride. They can distribute scarcity, but not create abundance. This bottle represents everything the East couldn't achieve and the West made routine. Just from a Coke. Just from a Coke. Your great-grandmother lived under Nazism. Your Oma grew up during Reconstruction. You've only known prosperity. Don't take it for granted. It comes from systems that respect human dignity, reward human effort, and trust human freedom. I learned that as a prisoner. Germany learned it through Reconstruction. The East is learning it now as their wall crumbles. Young Werner drank from the Coca-Cola. To him it was just soda. To his grandfather it was a monument, to lessons learned, ideologies shattered, and truths discovered in the most unlikely classroom, an enemy's prison camp. Epilogue, 2003. Hauptmann Werner Scholes died peacefully at age 89, surrounded by family in his Heidelberg apartment. His obituary noted his military service, his post-war business career, and his advocacy for German-American friendship. But his grandchildren remembered the stories. How their Opa survived North Africa, surrendered in Tunisia, and discovered truth in Kansas. How ice cream and Coca-Cola demolished his ideology more thoroughly than any bomb. How kindness from enemies taught him lessons that shaped modern Germany. At his funeral, his daughter Greta shared a final memory. Papa kept, his entire life, a crumpled note from an American woman named Margaret Henderson. She'd sent him Christmas cookies in 1944 when he was her country's prisoner. He saved that note, a stranger's kindness to an enemy, because it represented everything he learned, that strength includes mercy, that abundance flows from freedom, and that the greatest victories aren't won through destruction but through demonstration. She produced the note, carefully preserved in a frame. May you find peace and return safely to your family. God bless you. Margaret Henderson, December 1944. This, Greta said, tears streaming, this note from an enemy who showed humanity changed my father's life. It changed our family's life. And because thousands of German prisoners experienced similar kindness, it helped change Germany. We rebuilt our nation on lessons learned from enemies generous enough to teach us through their example. Papa always said, they defeated our armies, then defeated our ideology by treating us with dignity. That's the strength we must emulate. The congregation sang hymns. Friends shared memories. Family members mourned and celebrated. And afterward, following German tradition, they gathered at a cafe for coffee and cake. The cafe served American-style ice cream sundaes alongside traditional German pastries. Children drank Coca-Cola. Adults spoke of the deceased and of changing times. Young Werner, now 26, an economics student, raised his Coke bottle to Opa Scholz, who learned the world's most important lessons from a 5-cent bottle of pop. Who taught us that abundance flows from freedom. Who proved enemies can become teachers if we're humble enough to learn. They drank to his memory. The Coca-Cola tasted exactly as it had for 70 years, consistent, standardized, universally available. And somewhere in America, perhaps, an elderly woman who once sent Christmas cookies to German prisoners lived on, never knowing how her small kindness echoed through decades and helped shape a nation's rebirth. The greatest victories aren't won through destruction, but through demonstration. Not through taking, but through giving. Not through hatred, but through serving ice cream to enemies on a hot summer day. Those who experienced American abundance as prisoners became freedom's most unexpected ambassadors, transformed forever by the impossible reality of Coca-Cola and chocolate in enemy hands, proving that sometimes, the strongest weapon is simply the truth, delivered with sugar and carbonation.